Welcome back to another lesson here on educator.com, lessons on e-marketing. My name is Jim, and I want to extend upon the previous lesson about e-newsletters and about what it takes and the philosophies behind to create a successful e-newsletter campaign. And I know over here it says coding. I don't want to scare any of you who are not developers, or when it comes to this internet stuff, it's kind of a little confusing. So don't be worried about coding. We're not going to teach you how to code, but we're going to talk to you about the philosophies and the essence of the code that you will generate. So if we dove right in, the lesson overview, we're going to talk about a few things. One, of course, being the sign-up form, and of course, designing a site, which we'll go over, which we went over a little bit in the previous lesson. But I'm going to basically wing it here and kind of explain to you what I think is really important for you to know. As you know, that e-newsletters are pretty much regulated by the federal government. You just can't send out e-newsletters, okay? So if I was to write anything, first of all, I really want to emphasize getting permission, okay? So your sign-up form, okay, whatever the case may be, has to have a ability to enter not only your name and email, okay, but what it should also do is send an email to the person who signed up, okay, and allow them to accept entry into your database. Okay, in other words, when they enter their name and email, that recipient, whoever entered it, should also receive an email saying something like, hey, did you actually sign up? Okay, because all too often, I mean, let's go to a browser right now. Okay, and if we were to go to this browser, let's see if we can find one. Okay, here's Dr. Bob again. And let's go to Dr. Bob's actual website if we can. Let's click right here, as we can see, and we'll keep Dr. Bob quiet over here. Okay, there's Dr. Bob appearing. So notice that Dr. Bob has name and email address entry form. So pretty much the insecurity about all this is that anybody can enter anybody's name. Okay, so my name is Jim, and Paul from Minnesota can enter my name and email and press subscribe. I, however, didn't know that Paul did that. So in essence, Dr. Bob did not really get my permission to send out this email, or did not get my permission to put me on their database, and that's the problem. So what you want to do is you want to be able to make sure that once the submit button has been clicked, that the intended recipient, whoever is getting an email asking, hey, did you really sign up? And provide them with a link that he acknowledges, yes, it was me that signed up, not Paul, not Joe, not Jessica from somewhere else. These stuff does happen, okay, and trouble can happen when you're faced with that. I'm not saying that anything majorly bad, but if you don't get an opt-in, or if you get a request, hey, get me off your list, just do it. Do it. Trust me, you'll be happy you did. If somebody doesn't want to receive communication from you, you must honor that. It is the law. So in your sign-up form, you want to make sure that once the submit button is hit, that an email is followed to accept entry into the database. I'll go ahead and finish up the word database there. Okay, and most good email service providers allow for that. And we'll show you Campaign Monitor. Actually, you know what? Let's show it to you right now. Let's go into the browser, and let's go to, now, for those of you who don't know Campaign Monitor, I'll go ahead and write it down. Okay, it's called Campaign Monitor.com. It's free to join. And you can go ahead and select an account that's comfortable for you. It could be either monthly, or it could be per email basis. But whenever you create an account, okay? For instance, when you create a subscribe form and you generate the code, all right, you can actually, well, let's go back one. Okay. You can actually create an unsubscribe settings, okay? So whenever they're set out, somewhere here you can be able to, you can allow the person to select opt-in, okay? So we're going to go over creating an actual list, and one by one you'll be able to understand everything here that I'm trying to explain. So I think what they want me to do is actually create a list and create a form in that regards. So once they do get an email, they'll be allowed to opt in as we had mentioned. So I'm just going to check something out right here. Okay, here where we generate a field, and then we can start customizing it. Okay, subscription confirmation. This is what I was looking for. Now, when someone subscribes to my list, you can send them a welcome email, send them a plain text, or do nothing. Okay, I would send them a welcome email. Okay, you can just, it can be simple plain text email saying, hey, my name is Dr. Bob, or my name is Jim, and thank you for joining my database. Well, the person receiving it will be like, no, I didn't. Well, they can contact you and they can request an unsubscribe without any harm done. So, okay, so let's move back to the slides over here. And then, of course, I'm going to talk about designing a site. When I mean designing a site, I don't mean designing an entire website. What I really mean is pretty much designing a web page. I'm sorry, actually designing a email campaign. Okay. Step one, of course, is to collect names and emails. Okay, as you can see in some of these websites out there. Okay, and if we go back to the browser, go back to Dr. Bob's website. Okay, here he collects his names and his email. So that's step one. Okay, now step two, of course, is creating the newsletter or the email. So several things you must remember. First of all, one, allow for opt-in or accept entry. Email. In other words, once they've pressed the submit button, the person intended or the person's emails that is listed gets an email, a confirmation email. We'll also call it a confirmation email. So the thing is that unless they have accepted a second time, that they acknowledge that they have received or they accepted the fact that they want to enter into your database, they will not receive an email. So usually these confirmation email has a link that the recipient has to click on to allow themselves to be into the database. And unless that link is clicked, they're not going to be in the database. So there's pros and cons. Okay, some people are slow to respond. Some people are just, they'll do it later. The pros is that it keeps you safe. The next thing you want to do is make sure that your newsletter, okay, you have an opt-out. Okay, so you give the person an opt-out. You're receiving any more newsletters from you. You've got to do that. Then, of course, you want to list your name, your physical address, okay, and also you have to list your phone number. And I would also list down how you obtain their info. These are the three things that'll keep you safe. Okay, so you want to find out how you've got their info. You may want to say, okay, I found you at a networking event. Or you signed up on my website. you may want to ask those questions, okay? All right, let's go ahead and move to the next version. Now, this is a code that is typical of a sign-up form. All right, just to give you an example again, this is the code that Dr. Bob uses. So you've got the name and you got the email fields. All right, and this is the code that Dr. Bob uses. Okay, let me point out, okay, here is the name and here is the email. Everything else is just kind of gobbledygook, all right? So if we get back to the browser, and if we click back on the email here, let's go ahead and create let's show you the forms and how it's created. All right, so if I was to go to list and subscribers, and I want to create a new list. This is a list that already exists. Okay, I've got over 986 subscribers here. Now I want to create a new list, okay, and I can name that list, whatever it could be. Some of you may, let's say a school, okay, there could be a list for students, there could be a list for faculty, okay, so in this case we'll just go ahead and call it students. Now, here I'm given the type of list, okay, in other words, do I want a single opt-in or do I want a confirmed opt-in? This is what I talked about, confirmation. So if I decide confirmed opt-in, the person who signs up for my newsletter, enter their name and email, will get an email, again, as I mentioned before, okay, in the previous code. They'll sign up here, and basically what they will do is they will be getting an email where they have to click on a link saying, yes, that's me, this is the real person. So I'll go ahead and create the list, and then I can add the first subscribers, okay, or I can just get the code, which is what I normally do. I create a subscribe form. So with the subscribe form, okay, here it lists fields to include. I can put email, name, and if I want to add more fields, I can do that, although I wouldn't add more than 3 fields. Okay, you may want to add, let's say relationships. In other words, how did I get to know you? How did I get to know you, okay? Or let's write it out. How did you find out about us? How did you find out? I guess it's only so much. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and increase a little bit. This could be a text field. It could be multiple options. I would keep it as a text field, and I would add it, and then they can list down, okay? So then here it is, add the custom field. So here you go. I got the name, I got the email. How did you find out? All right, and so at this point right now, I'm going to go ahead and shrink it back down. All right, and I'm pretty satisfied. So I will go ahead and go back to the previous page. All right. And I will see somehow, some way that I can go ahead and generate this form if they allow me to do that. Here's the students, and I will go ahead and create a form. Okay, here it is. So I'll go ahead and increase it again. Notice that the 3 fields, name, email, that's by default, and I will select this one, how did you find out? And if I want to add more, okay, great. But I will generate the code, and this is the code that I've generated. All I got to do is copy, okay, and put it in a nice little web editor. And I'll go ahead and open up one of these editors here, and I'll just paste the code. I will save it. I will open up, and let's look at it, how it looks in the browser. There you see, name, email, how did I find out? Okay, now at this point I can make a correction. I would never send out a form that just asks, how did you find out? I'll go back to the web editor and I'll fix it at this point. In the platform supplied by Campaign Monitor, they didn't let you go past a certain amount of characters. But I'll go ahead and type it in here. How did you find out about us? And then I will save it, I'll go back to the browser, refresh the browser, and notice that everything is there. Now, once they click submit button, okay, so at this point, what happens once you click the submit button? The ideal thing is to give a message, a thank you message. We got your information, kind of a message. All right, so if I could only go back to the, let's go back to the slides here. All right, so in the previous slide, I basically gave some steps, but the next step is after submission, okay, I'm going to write it down here. After submission, they should go to, or they should get either a message, okay, or a landing page. Okay, one of the two. All right, so if you want to go ahead and press, let's go back to the form here under Create Send. All right, we can customize this. Okay, we can go back to the form builder. Let's go back another one. 1 second, sorry. All right, so customize landing pages. Okay, we can either create our own, okay, or we can add a web address. Thank you. Okay, but basically it just kind of, you want to say something. You can either, I wouldn't do nothing, okay? Send them a plain text email, okay, or send them an HTML, plain text, it doesn't matter. Send them something, say, hey, welcome to our list. And now, of course, let's go ahead and see what happens here when I put in my name, okay, and put in my email. How did I find out about you? Through educator.com. So I'm going to press submit, and here I am. Here's a thank you letter, okay? So that's the steps you want to give. Now I can go ahead and return back to the site. I'm back to the original site. Of course, there was no other site over there. So that's pretty much what you want to, the steps you want to take when it comes to, coding, when it comes to the proper coding and the proper procedures on sending out an email, a professional way to do things. And so I would definitely look at this. Let's go on and talk about a little bit more. I think I'm going to be repeating myself here. Again, this is the section where you want to keep this. You want to make sure that you place your form on the top part, okay, of website, where it's pretty visible. In other words, as soon as someone enters your website, they should see the name, and they should see the email, and maybe one other. Most importantly, they should see the subscribe button, okay? And I highlighted this just so you can see. All right, step 3 is to create the newsletter. And again, this is a web page, okay? And I explained in the previous lesson that a newsletter is actually a single web page. You can use Dreamweaver, you can use FileZilla, you can also use Composer.net and download the software there. And again, this is a regular newsletter that you can create as if it's a regular web page. All right. And then finally on step 4, you can run it through the processor. Again, I was showing you all this time Campaign Monitor, and I think that is the best one out there. And it's obviously a very, very useful tool. But any one of these are good as long as you follow the basic steps. So I'm going to repeat, okay? You want to collect names and emails, okay? Names, emails, okay? You want to have a double opt-in, okay, or a confirmation. I know I'm throwing a lot of terms at you. Confirmation, email, that makes sure that they are indeed the ones who sign their or put their name and email information into your website. Then you want to have on the bottom part, the footer of your newsletter should have your address, okay, address, phone, and how they found out about you. All right, and then of course, last but not least, you have to allow them to opt out if they want to opt out. Okay, so that's the most important thing. Now, a little bit about coding. we're going to go to the final slide over here, is that you got to make sure you use absolute URLs, okay? And you can ask your web designer what an absolute URL is. Let's go to let's go to the browser if we can find out. Okay, a little bit about that. Let's go ahead and shut this down. Let's go ahead and keep that up. Let's shut this down. Okay, so let's find out what absolute URL is. Now, if I can go ahead and let me see if I can find the image information. It's probably way over here. I'm going to move this over here. Okay, and I will type in the actual URL into this software. Let's go ahead and shut this down. Let me open up this. An absolute URL looks something like this. Okay. And forgive me, I'm showing a little bit HTML code. You don't have to worry about what I'm writing, except now. Okay. This whole URL, okay, if I can increase the size, this whole web address right here, starting from HTTP, all this characters, all the way to the actual JPEG, is what is known as an absolute URL. A relative URL only shows half this much. In other words, it'll only show this part right here. And let me go ahead and copy and paste this. And paste this right here. Okay. And most websites, they won't write. When it comes to web development, most webmasters won't write the absolute URL, but they'll write the relative URL, which is this. Notice that it's not the absolute exact location of a web page. Why? Because most time the images folders are within the actual server itself. But keep in mind, when you're sending out newsletters, you're sending it out to other people around the world or wherever, your list, okay, and they don't have this file, fb.jpg, in their server. They're not even on a server, okay? So if I was to save this, let's see what happens, okay? And hopefully I'll be able to prove myself a little bit here. And let's go to this thing, this page here, okay? Now notice that this, you see, I guess I'll have to increase a little bit. Let me go back to Simultron real quick and add these codes. These are break codes, by the way. And I really encourage you to consider yourself or somebody to take a course which I taught. It's called HTML 5.0. You'll be learning all about this coding if you have the time to learn. I encourage it. So now, I'm going to increase significantly here. That's as big as it'll go. Notice that what this graphic here of Dr. Bob is the result of the absolute URL. This right here, you notice this little highlighted blue little thing? Well, that's the relative URL. That's what happens when you don't give an absolute URL. So the rule of thumb is, whenever you code for a newsletter, make sure your webmaster uses absolute URLs. Okay, otherwise you're going to get broken images, broken links, broken everything. Okay, and so hopefully I haven't scared you too much, but you know, this is what's going to look like right here. Okay, if you use relative URL, sometimes they're also called links. You get missing images, you get broken links. What you want is this right here, the absolute URL. And that pretty much covers this lesson, and the absolute truth is that I really enjoyed it. Hopefully you did too. And this is Jim. Stay tuned for the next lesson here on educator.com.